Okay, folks, here I am live. I'm going to talk about the election of Donald Trump a couple days ago on Tuesday night. It was surprising to many, and I first want to talk about his chart, what showed it clearly for, since we saw Trump rise on the scene, why, I'll just start with that. I'll say why it was hard to make a prediction and then sort of go forward from there. So one of the limitations of the medium here is that you have to do we do these live hangouts through our phone, and so I can't show a screenshot of something. I can show you my computer, which shows Trump's chart. Maybe you can see that. You can see right there, that's his chart. Okay, so those of you who know astrology probably already know his chart. If you don't, I will outline it for you. It's Leo rising sign, and he has Mars in the first house, Jupiter in the second house retrograde. He's got the moon in Ketu, the moon in the south node, in Scorpio in his fourth house. He's got the sun in Rahu in his 10th house. Mercury is in Gemini in his 11th house, and Saturn and Venus are in his 12th house of Cancer. So when we look at astrology timing, and I'm going to focus as much on the timing here as anything right now. I'll get into analyzing his chart for, character or strengths and flaws or whatever in a bit. But first, to just talk about why it was easy to see that he could be elected president, has to do with his dashas. So Trump was in Rahu Mars dasha, and he started Rahu Mars at the end of last year in October 2015. This Rahu Mars cycle ends actually next week. In 4 days he goes into Jupiter dasha. 4 days. This was also one of the reasons why it's such a hard to be absolutely definitive, even though we have his chart on a birth certificate. Anything that's that close, literally, if you change his birth time by 30 seconds or a minute, then Jupiter dasha started last week, or it's very tricky. Anyway, so Rahu Mars is the dasha that he's in right now, and it started the end of last year, October 28th of 2015. So why would Rahu Mars get him elected? Well, first I'll just say this. For Donald Trump, Rahu Mars really shows like the pinnacle of his power, in the sense of, at least up until that time in his life, and maybe even going forward. One of the reasons why him getting elected, if this was correct, would be scary for me, why it made me go, oh man, I kind of hope it doesn't happen, but I'll interpret that a little differently here as we go forward as well, and give the opportunities or the possibilities, is that Rahu Mars shows him at his most powerful, also his most kind of, I should be careful, not necessarily most powerful, but at least up until that time, it could be the most, powerful that way. Then, sorry, something just happened here. Then, sorry, I've had a little glitch here. Okay. The Jupiter dasha is much more complicated. It's much harder to tell what would happen. So I see I'm already getting some critics here. I'm going to talk about my quotes, predictions about Trump, and my history with it. So, you know, that's fine. I'm fine for people to post stuff like that. I am going to talk about my past with, you know, posting things about Trump and his chart and things that I've said about it and quote predictions about it. So anyway, I'm just going to go forward. So Rahu Mars definitely showed that he could be the president. There's no question about it. And his next dasha, his Jupiter dasha, is much more ambiguous. And because it's retrograde and it's a huge shift and a huge change that could come, it makes it much more unpredictable. So it's very clearly shown that he could win at that time because what are called Raja Yogas, Mars in his first house, is a very powerful Raja Yoga for him. It's the ninth lord in the first, which shows everything that you see, this Rahu nature to be very unpredictable, confusing, but also have enormous amounts of courage to go forward with things and to, you know, be sort of fearless and to succeed. But I want you to understand, and somebody else already started hammering me about, didn't you predict this and that and this and that? What I wanted to make clear is that what was obvious was that he could win. But it is equally obvious that he could get very far and lose. Again, I know that this is how it works because when you have to make a prediction about which one is actually going to win, it's very different. And it's the reason that I didn't actually make a prediction about who was going to win when it came down to him or Hillary Clinton, because we didn't have an authentic chart of Hillary Clinton to compare it to, okay? You have to compare the two people and the strength based on that day and every other thing. It was easy to see how either one of them could win on election day based on the data that we have. But to make that hairline delineation, that hairline distinction, was really pretty impossible without at least from my point of view, at least from my standards of making a prediction, without her actual birth time. So it's very easy, and I acknowledge and honor the astrologers that did say Trump will win. Honestly, it didn't take a lot of courage to be able to say that on some level. It took courage in another way, which I'll talk about in a minute, but it was obvious to see that Trump could win. It was also obvious to see that Hillary Clinton could win. And I'll just also address this now because some people have seen over the last year and a half or so since he really entered the race. First of all, I'll just say this too, and I want to make sure that, you know, this video is not going to be me like clarifying all of these people who say, well, you predicted he would lose and you're ruining astrology. I'm not going to respond to the flaming, even though I know some of that will be here. People want to hear that part, but I'll just give a little bit of context of the way I've commented on his chart before and then get into a little more personal stuff later because I don't want this to dominate. But the point is, when you're doing anything like that, because I've done a lot of predictions, I used to do a lot of this kind of predicting world events, especially when I was younger, and you kind of, on some level, especially when you have a lot of people watching what you're doing, you can tend to throw a kind of thing into the mix and then it freaks everybody out and then people are like, oh, no, and then you just kind of walk away. A lot of the astrologers that I saw who did come out and make a prediction for Trump and then just kind of walked away, there's a tendency to create a little bit of panic and then you just kind of leave it alone when the truth is again, it clearly showed that he could win. That doesn't mean I thought he would win, and I didn't think he would win because of many things, and many things that actually showed in polling data, many things that actually showed throughout the entire election. But I also knew, and I said very early in my first videos last summer, that if he got through the very difficult phase that he was in back then, when I first did the video was last June or early July 2015, he was still in Rahu Moon. And I said if he gets through the Venus retrograde cycle, because Venus had gone retrograde into his 12th house, and then I knew it was going to go forward through his first house, and if he got through all of that, which took him up to around the end of October and into November, which also perfectly coincided with his Rahu-Mars cycle, I said if he gets through that, I think he'll be the nominee. That's what I said. I said if he gets through that, I think he'll be the nominee. And again, I said that in the middle of a whole lot of other things where I was kind of ranting and raving about how much I really disagreed with Trump, and just, you know, full disclosure, that is the truth. Because I said that in the midst of a lot of other things, many people heard that I'm ranting and raving against Trump and then saying, oh, you're not being an objective astrologer. And they didn't hear the other stuff that I said, and that's fine. I don't really care. I'm just giving context to the fact that when you're making predictions about things, there is all kinds of range, there's an entire range of possibility. And believe me, I know I said that because I know that's what I've thought, but then along the way, I've also come out several times and said, okay, this is where I think his luck has kind of run out. And these were all different times when the tide could have changed, and it did change even more for brief periods of time. One of them was when he declared, and these are still big issues. Every time these things happened, they coincided with very important transits. One of them is when Jupiter was right about to go into Leo. This is coincided directly with when he said, I'm going to ban all Muslims. I came out right then and said, I think this is going to sink him, because it was a big shift. And again, it didn't sink him, but what wound up happening in retrospect, which I also said it's very possible that it could make him stronger. I already know these things because I kind of lived through it. People cherry pick what they like about what I said and what they don't like about what I said, and then say, well, you predicted he wouldn't win, so you have no credibility. That's fine, you can say that. But I know what I was doing. At the time, I also was not formulating this as I am now predicting the election. That wasn't my focus then. My focus was, here's how we can see astrology working. This is what most 95% of my video updates are on. Here's how we can see astrology working. Jupiter is just about to move into Leo, and this Leo guy that we can see, this stuff is happening. And then part of that is me also talking about Trump, which is what I did and what I had been doing. Again, people focus on, you're an astrologer, you're making a prediction about something, and that part of it is incredibly minor, at least from my point of view, and it became incredibly major to a lot of other people's points of view. At some point, they couldn't even hear the rest of the video because they were just looking, oh, you don't like Trump, I don't like you, I'm going to flame you. Or, I like Trump, is he going to win? Oh my God, the world's going to come to an end. And they didn't even hear the teaching, so I stopped doing it, except for at other parts. So this is a little bit of just my history on this Trump, history with the predictions and all of that stuff. You see it differently than I see it. My point of view always with videos, including this video, is to educate people about what's going on. To educate people and say, look, this transit is happening, and we can see this in Trump and in the election. And by the way, most of the time I was also talking about Bernie Sanders, and we can see it equally on the Sanders side. Bernie Sanders representing this revolution on the left, Trump representing it on the right. And anyway, so most of my point of view is to educate people about what's going on, because Trump was such a present figure and so reminiscent of what we were doing. A lot of that was mixed in, and of course my personal views. I'm not going to pretend that I thought Trump should be president or would be a good president, but that being what it is, what I want to talk about now is where we go from here. So I hope that makes sense to people. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that part, a little part of that a little bit later, but where we go from here is also very interesting. And again, we had Trump's Dasha. He was in Rahu Mars. And again, he could have easily fulfilled the promise of Rahu Mars being like the culmination of his power by not winning the election, but going as far as he's gone, because that's exactly where he was. He's never had more power than he has now, at least up until this part in his life. His Jupiter Dasha is tricky. It's hard to figure. Jupiter definitely makes him powerful. It would make him powerful regardless. And he will be starting that Dasha, as I said, in a few days. We could say, according to the exact birth time we have, but it's, you know, it's not a foregone conclusion that just because someone has won the election that they're going to be sworn in, for example. And I'm going to talk about that now as well. One of the things that we can already see in Trump's Jupiter Dasha that's about to start is he has a court date coming up for Trump University. That's, I think it's November 28th. So right when his Jupiter Dasha starts, he has to go to court for Trump University. These are open court cases. There's other pending litigation against him as well. And we'll have to see what happens with those things. Again, when he was born, Jupiter was retrograde in his second house. One of the things we can see with that retrograde Jupiter in the second house is his kind of rambling, exaggerated communication style. Jupiter exaggerates things. It's in the second house. It's retrograde, where he's often saying something and then he goes back on that. He floats some big kind of bombastic idea. Then when everyone gets all worked up, he pulls it back and goes, well, no, that's not what I really said. And to many who are looking for consistency in what someone communicates, it looks like lying, distortion, hedging your bets, kind of saying everything and anything, no matter what, so that you can eventually at some point say, well, that's what I said, even though you've kind of said everything at one time or another. So we can see that Jupiter in the second house in his communication style. We can also see it in the fact that it creates enormous wealth. It's the fifth house ruler in the second, but also the retrograde. He gets wealth, he loses it. Bankruptcies, this kind of style that's not so organized and so together, at least on the surface. So the fact that he starts his Jupiter Dasha in 4 days, again, I want you to understand, that's the end of an 18-year, that's the end of an 18-year Rahu cycle. It's ending in 4 days. And a 16-year Jupiter cycle starts. That's big. And it's the reason why, again, the Rahu Dasha showed him at the height of his power. Literally, he came back, sort of back from the dead in the Rahu Dasha. And Rahu Mars, especially, so far, it's the most powerful Dasha that he's had. Jupiter is much more ambiguous. By the way, the reason Rahu is so powerful is it's eclipsing the sun. When Rahu gets the sun, it's very powerful. Mars is a powerful Raja Yoga. Mars also rules the sun in Rahu because they're in Mrigashira Nakshatra. So all of the power that he has to influence and affect, and they're in it, and Rahu's sun is in his 10th house. Mars was the 9th lord in his 1st house. This is why you see, okay, he's won the presidency. Now what? He won. Okay. Congratulations, you won. Now what happens? You get the power, which is what Rahu Mars wanted, but being president means you are constantly under fire. There ain't a lot of people, I mean, there are people cheering the president, but the president is also a lightning rod. for everybody's criticism. And it ain't fun. Let's put it that way. You have to want to do it because you want to serve. You have to want to do it because you really want to make a difference. Not just because, from what we've been able to see from Trump, I'm not saying it isn't sincere, but to him it's just like, everybody else is so stupid. I believe that I know what's right, and so let's create a movement. He has never had public service. He doesn't know what it's like to be a public servant, like to even be a congressman or he doesn't know what it takes to do that because he hasn't done it yet. It's not like running a business. You're basically, for one thing, taking fire from everyone. And you have to have a thick skin, and he's shown that he hasn't. I'm saying this because it might be very easy to say that, well, how can you say that Rahu Mars is the pinnacle of what he's going to accomplish in life when he's about to go into Jupiter, and he's going to be more powerful in Jupiter than Rahu Mars? Yes, he's going to have more power in the sense of the capacity to wield more influence, more power at his fingertips, literally. But the president is much less powerful on one level, like day to day, than Trump has been as the man at the center of this whole movement going all over the place. If you understand what I'm saying, I want you to understand this, okay? It's basically like the difference between literally being a king, which he's been, and which he wants to be. He's got all these planets in Leo. He's the king in his mind. And saying, I'm going to come in and be the good king. And then he steps into an office where he's anything but the king. He's the one with the power, but he's also, the power of the president is to serve. That's where the power comes from. And if you can't serve as a president, your life's going to be miserable, and you're going to make the country miserable, and you're not going to rise to power. You're going to be humiliated and unempowered eventually. And by the way, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen with Trump. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying the unambiguous power of Rahu Mars is very different than the complicated station in life that he's going to find himself in Jupiter. And it's starting in 4 days as I record this on November 10th. So even though he's going to have more impact because he will be president if he gets sworn in, if it actually happens, the experience that he has to like make everybody do what he wants them to do, which is the point, everybody's going to do what I want them to do, is going to greatly diminish once he becomes president. I'll give you an example. He could stand there and just say, I'm going to ban the press or do this, or I'm going to do that and do this. And at least in that moment for him, everybody cheers and they're like, yeah. Or I'm going to make the Congress do this. I'm going to build that wall. And everybody goes, yeah. And in his mind, he's like, I'm going to do it. What happens when he's president and none of that stuff happens? And the people he said he was going to do that for become frustrated. And the people he's trying to compromise with become frustrated. Because it's going to be really hard for Trump to ever please the people that are already angry at him, that he's already angered, if he can ever do it. If he starts compromising with liberals or starts being seen, like even today as I record this, he was seen with President Obama saying how great Obama is, how he's a nice man and all this stuff. How many more of those kinds of things are going to happen before these guys who voted for him into office with the pitchforks start saying, you sold out too? The point is, when you're president, and Obama saw this as well. Obama became president, and all of a sudden he's attacked, of course, from the Republican side, from the Republican right. And then after a couple years in office, all of the Democrats, all the progressives are also calling him a sellout. So when you're president, you're getting it from everyone. You compromise and you're a sellout to your base. If you don't compromise, then you can't get anything done. The point being, Jupiter Dash is going to be very different. There's hope. There's a lot of hope that I have. I have hope that Trump has the capacity, he has the capability, and he does, it's shown in his chart, and he's done it in his life, and he has the capacity to step into a higher role. And what encourages me the most about the fact that he's going into his Jupiter Dasha is Jupiter is really that dignified, regal quality of Leo. What I mean to say is that the Leo really becomes the gracious leader because of the influence of Jupiter more than anything else. It's the fearless king that will fight for the good with Mars. It's that vision of the sun, which he has, but the gracious leader comes from Jupiter. The gracious, like sovereign, like the protective father who wants to protect all the kids, even the ones he doesn't like as much. And one of the things that I've been hopeful of, that I am hopeful of, and I'm still holding on, and I've said this publicly now recently, that I've been Trump's fiercest critic from the beginning, and I have the body blows and the arrows to prove it. I've pissed a lot of people off on YouTube, on Facebook. I've lost friends. I've been battling this for a year, thinking that this was not the way to go. And I'm still quite concerned. Quite concerned about all the alt-right people, the white supremacists, that whole thing that he incited in order to get votes. I'm still very concerned. But my hope is that when he steps into the office itself and he starts realizing the enormity of the power he has, he will become, what is the big word, folks? Humbled. This man needs humility. This man who walked around for a year and a half, I know more than the generals. I'm going to do that. Like people saying, you're not going to do anything like that if you win. It's nothing like that. You need to listen. You need to realize you don't know everything. I almost said you don't know what you're talking about. That sounds like a denigration, but on some level it's true because he's never even held office. So I'm hopeful that he becomes humbled by the task before him and steps into that Jupiter, because Jupiter is the energy of life that makes us gracious. And when Jupiter becomes alive in a person, they step into a more gracious mentality and they get the lesson of the Rahu Dasha. This is how the Dasha cycles work. This is why Jupiter comes after Rahu, because Rahu is a time of confusion. I don't care how powerful it is. You look at his Rahu Dasha, it was a time when he created The Apprentice and rebranded everything and came back from the dead with all of his branding and all of his personal, frankly, humiliation that came in the last Dasha when he became bankrupt, when he went through all those bankruptcies. No matter how he tried to spin it, he was humiliated. He was put on an allowance by federal mandate by his creditors. He was really kind of destroyed. Rahu Dasha resurrected that, and because it gave him enormous power because of the way Rahu is disposed, but it's still a time of confusion always. You need to be able to delineate between results and intelligence. Trump has a lot of stuff that he works through, and Rahu Dasha was a time of success because of the Raja Yogas, Rahu Mars especially, but it's still a time of confusion where we're working on trying to evolve something in ourselves very quickly. And with him, it's his relationship to power, because Rahu is in the 10th with the sun. So he is moving from Rahu, which is him trying to see how much power can I get? And I can get a lot because I got a really powerful Rahu. It's joined the sun, it's eclipsing it, it's exalted, and in Rahu Mars, I'm going to take on everybody who has been screwing you over, and I'm going to push how much power I can get to the nth degree. That's what it's been. And then Jupiter comes and says, what's the lesson from all of that? So there is a great possibility that in his Jupiter Dasha, he steps into a higher manifestation of the ways that he's been trying to expand. The typical ways that Jupiter tries to expand, the first way is actually through money and wealth, because Jupiter is the abstract quality of life. It's about wealth, the idea that I can accumulate a lot of wealth, a lot. I got a lot of wealth. And it can certainly be like that. And, you know, there's a great song by 9 Inch Nails called Head Like a Hole. And he says, God, money, I'll do anything for you. God, money, just tell me what you want me to. And he says, God, money, which basically says, we're on some level, we're almost either worshiping one or the other until we know ourselves really well. Before we know ourselves really well, we think that the way to expand in life is through material expansion, and money really represents that. I'm saying this because Donald Trump has lived a life of greed and privilege. I'm just going to say it flat out. Privilege, which became greed, excess, and all of that. And that can transform. The evolutionary process of Jupiter is transforming and elevating that. He's had a lot of personal confusion about it in his life, and I think he still has a lot of it. And I hope that his Jupiter dasha is better than the way he's used Jupiter in the past. My fear through all these months, back last summer, when I said very clearly he can definitely win, and if he wins, I think it's going to be a disaster. That's what I said before. And I did say it, and I said it many times. I didn't think he would win because of all these demographics that he's alienated, and he could have easily gone through all of this and lost and still been shown in the chart. Like I said before, it was really impossible to know whether or not he could win because we couldn't compare it to another chart, an accurate chart. But one of the things I was afraid of is that his Jupiter dasha, he's misused Jupiter a lot in his life for his personal gain, greed. I'm going to get a lot of money, then I'm going to lose a lot of money. I'm going to say anything I need to say to get what I want, even if I'm lying, even if I'm changing my mind, even if I say this, then I say that, say this, say that, say this, say that, and then say what? What are you all talking about? I've been totally consistent. And just this whole, like, this kind of cyclone of thoughts that just come out all over the place. That's how Jupiter has been. That's what we've recognized as his kind of leadership and his sort of guidance and his, quote, vision. And he's used that in many ways to get a lot of money and just kind of conflate his identity. But now that he's taken on this responsibility, he can step into a higher level of that. Absolutely. He can become more reflective. He can become more buttoned down, more serious. Jupiter is in Virgo in his natal chart. Virgo is very much about details, the consequences. And we can already see that this happened. When Jupiter went into Virgo in the sky at the end of the summer, this is when the press came out. This is when he started to just completely plummet in the polls. As soon as Jupiter went into Virgo in his natal chart in the summer, this was right after his convention, when he started attacking the four-star family and he started just putting his foot in his mouth. And the press came out and said, enough. We're scrutinizing your words now. We're paying attention to what you're saying now, and you can't just say anything with impunity. Because the other thing, to be honest, as much as Trump has talked about a media conspiracy, the media has rode him like a horse. He's gotten more benefit from the media than anyone ever, especially just his opinions constantly changing and them just not calling him on it. They started really fact-checking and staying on it and not letting him up off the mat or letting his spokespeople off the mat when he would say things that were all over the place. That started when Jupiter went into Virgo. And it threatened to sink his presidency over and over, or his candidacy over and over again. By the way, I want to say this. The reason he won is because of the lack of support for Hillary Clinton. Maybe I should have said this at the beginning, but Donald Trump got less votes than John McCain or Mitt Romney, both of them, the last two Republicans. Hillary Clinton got the same percentages that Barack Obama did. It's just she didn't get the support. If the same numbers would have turned out for her, she would have won in the Electoral College. She did win the popular vote. So the reason Hillary Clinton lost isn't because everyone in the country, the majority of the country, agrees with Donald Trump. It's that his supporters were more enthusiastic than hers, and Hillary Clinton made a lot of personal decisions with servers and all, emails, and she represented an establishment that did not excite the people that needed to show up in order to defeat him. So he has an opportunity going into the Jupiter Dasha to be a gracious leader, and let's hope that the gravitas of his station in life now is going to elevate him. And that's what a Jupiter Dasha is. I'm not just saying this pie in the sky. Let's hope. The reason I wanted to do this is to say this is shown by astrology. Okay, it's shown by the astrology that his dashas are changing 4 days after the election toward Jupiter. And we could get the rambling, imprecise, speaking off the cuff, exaggerating, conspiracy theorizing guy, which a lot of that is shown by his retrograde Jupiter in the second. Clearly. And it's the reason I said if he wins, it will be a disaster for the country and the world. I've said it, and I've been saying it for a year and a half. And you're saying, well, now you're going back and saying it could be okay. Yeah, because it could. It could always be okay. I said it could be. I never say anything is definite. And I say that because I've seen too often situations change situations. Karmas and our station changes the possibility. Now that he's in this station of life as the actual president who has won, not the candidate who can shoot his mouth off really without consequence, this is the kind of situation that elevates Jupiter anyway, because Jupiter is very related to our leaders and those inspiring figures. And by the way, I said it the entire time Jupiter was going through Leo. Go back and listen. The entire time Jupiter was going through Leo, I said, this is why we see the rise of Donald Trump as an inspiring figure on the right and Bernie Sanders as an inspiring figure on the left. I said it over and over again. The rise of these inspiring figures. And now the inspiring figure has won, and he's going into Jupiter Dasha. He could step into being an inspiring figure now for the country, not just for the marginalized 25 to 35% or whatever it is of the population that voted for him. He needs to be a president for all the people and realize that the United States is a country in the world. And he could step into that. And I say this because if you look at his past, one of the reasons why Republicans hated him, you go back to the Republican primaries, what were they saying the whole time? He's not a real Republican. He's used to be pro-life. He used to be this. He's more liberal. You know, he's a New York liberal. And frankly, they were right. He used to be a New York liberal. And it's very easy to understand and to conclude, especially because he just came out of his Rahu Dasha, that his whole run to the president, that he was using the Republican platform to become president. In fact, people were saying it the whole time. This isn't just me making it up. He was using the Republican Party to become president. He could never use the Democratic Party to become president. But the Republicans, he could get in with that birther, all of the stuff that he's used to coerce and basically hijack the platform, starting with birtherism. And then taking that disaffected white vote, which is why he won white people. That's why he's president. But before that, I mean, he said as late as 2011 that, or no, was it 2011? At least 2008 that Hillary Clinton was great. Bill Clinton was great. He was a total Democrat. He said, he's on record all over the place as saying the economy does better in the hands of Democrats and all this stuff. So I had no doubt that he could just change and start and revert to that. Who knows? This is what's scary about him is really who knows. Because he could be anything, and it's hard to know. So his Jupiter Dasha does show the potential, if he winds up taking the oath of office, if he actually winds up going through it, that he could, by the gravitas of the office, revert to a more gracious nature that's more tolerant, that is not... That really abandons all of this hardline rhetoric. There's a lot of scary indications. To me, the scariest things about this result is the people he could surround himself with. the fact that he's so inexperienced, he's going to be relying on people like Mike Pence, who is a total hardcore conservative. Mike Pence thought that gays should go through conversion therapy. I mean, these are draconian ideas. And Mike Pence could be the most... We thought Dick Cheney was powerful. Mike Pence could be Dick Cheney times 10. At least George W. Bush had been a governor and at least understood a little bit about how the bureaucracy works. Trump has no experience. None. He doesn't even know how any of it works. Pence was a senator. He was a governor. And there's a huge split between Pence and Donald Trump. Huge split. I don't think Mike Pence shares almost any of Donald Trump's points of view. Mike Pence just denied everything Trump said with a smile. That's how Mike Pence got through the whole thing. And Mike Pence is very much more in line with ultra-conservative Republicans in the Senate and the House. And Trump is not. Trump is going to get into all kinds of battles with them already, but I don't want to get into the policy part of it. I mainly want to talk about what's coming up. So to summarize, Trump is going into Jupiter Dasha in 4 days on November 14th. I'm sorry, November 14th. Okay? November 14th. He has court dates after that with over Trump University and all of this stuff. And as someone just said here, as Olia said, Jupiter rules his 5th and 8th houses. Again, Jupiter is the dasha of his 8th lord. 8th house also has to do with things like war and all kinds of destruction. It could be really hard. It really could if he becomes president. I've always said this, and I'm going to say it again. I thought that he could drop out. I said that I thought he would drop out when his numbers really tanked, or that he would be replaced. And he didn't, but there was a lot of talk about it actually right after I said it. Even now, on some level, I would not be surprised if something very unpredictable happened, where maybe it's not even discussed openly, but after he becomes inaugurated or something, he steps down, or even between now and then, an uproar. We could have just unending protests. I mean, this is a watershed event in our country because we've never had someone become president who has been so divisive, and we're already seeing all these protests. Think back of all the other presidential elections you've seen. Have you ever seen all these protests? I'm not saying I think they're going to continue, but I think, especially with Trump changing to this retrograde Jupiter in his 2nd house, and Jupiter is the 8th lord, also the 5th lord, there's a lot of uncertainty. If he does become president and becomes inaugurated there and does decide to serve, there is the possibility of him evolving quickly into a statesman because of the gravitas of the office and realizing, okay, I just can't get into Twitter battles and all this stuff. I need to watch what I say. I need to be very careful. And by the way, he has shown that. He's shown that even at the end of this presidential run. The last couple weeks, he just shut up and read the teleprompter and didn't bloviate like that. That's what he needs to do as president. He needs to be quiet and only communicate when's necessary and really get control over his communication faculties. Again, the scariest part to me are the people that he surrounds himself with. There was a report earlier today that Steve Bannon might be his chief of staff. If you don't know who Steve Bannon is, he is the godfather of this alt-right movement. Now, these are white supremacist conspiracy theorists. It is absolutely frightening beyond imagination. And it's the reason I said it would be a disaster if he became president, or it could be. It could be a tragedy beyond what we could imagine to have a president with that much power who does not appreciate evidence and science, and instead trades off science for conspiracy theory, mumbo jumbo, like Trump has done. This is what the Trump we have seen. And hopefully it was Rahu, and that in Jupiter Dasha, more wisdom will come into this man's brain, and he will stop this conspiracy theory craziness. It got him elected. It would be disastrous as a president if he served. And if he surrounds himself with people like Steve Bannon, a conspiracy theory alt-right demagogue, I mean, this isn't too far from like Alex Jones and InfoWars and just like reptile agendas and all of this stuff. I mean, Trump is not, at least as we've seen, he's only 2 or 3 like clicks away from that level of paranoia about what's really going on. Maybe now, and he's been getting security briefings since the summer. The same security briefings that Hillary Clinton had gotten and that others have gotten, and he had been just dismissing all of that as they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about anyway. What do they know? They haven't been doing, they don't know what they're talking about anyway. This is what Trump had been saying publicly about getting high-level security briefings and not believing it. Like, oh, that's just a bunch of conspiracies as well. So again, he has shown the tendency to have that actually be his thought process. And if that goes into the presidency, again, brace for impact. That would be, it's hard to imagine the level of catastrophe that could happen if this is really what goes on. I'm hoping it isn't. And that his Jupiter Dasha brings more thoughtfulness, more discrimination from him because it's Jupiter in Virgo, that he steps into a statesman, that he has the discrimination to realize that, okay, this is different now. I have to be like a good father. And by all appearances, he's been a good father. His children looked like they were raised very well. And maybe this sense of duty will settle in. So I hope I've made my point on Jupiter, his Jupiter Dasha. The next couple months, there are criminal and there's investigations at the Trump University. A lot could change. A lot will change between now and Inauguration Day. The ACLU has already came out and said, which is American Civil Liberties Union, have already come out and said that they're going to be very vigilant against Trump. And once the shock of all of this wears off, which I think we're going to start seeing next week, when Trump goes in, when that Jupiter Dasha actually starts, which is going to be next week, we're going to start seeing a lot more incoming. Because right now, America and the world is a little bit in shock. And we're saying, okay, we need to try to like heal and come together and try to get our head around what's happened. But then it's going to turn into a little bit of like, okay, wait a second. It's not acceptable for you to be this way. And we're going to see a lot of, we're going to see how Trump responds under fire before he even becomes president. So, last thing that I want to say, I've talked quite a bit about my history here and there. Like, I'm a little bit about how it's been with me talking about Trump. And at times, walking the fine line, or not, I'm not going to say walking the fine line. I'll be very transparent, probably violating the fine line between objective astrologer and what I think, okay? And I will say that, you know, some of the criticism is fair, or if not all of it is, if you're judging me as you're supposed to be an objective astrologer all the time and never talk about how you, sorry, wait a second. Okay. And never talk about how you feel, or in fact, suspend what you can see in the chart. So here's the thing, just like I'm doing now, okay, it's impossible to read a chart and not see what you see and not say what you're seeing, okay? Just like I've done in this video. Those of you who don't like Donald Trump, maybe there aren't any of you here, but usually just don't like when I talk about the way he speaks and communication style, and, you know, he's got Moon K2 in Scorpio, debilitated. This is why he's so touchy and so sensitive and so thin-skinned, and this is why he lashes out, and he's unpredictable, and he makes money and loses money. He lies, doesn't tell the truth. people that like Trump hate that I say that, but I can't look at the chart and not see it and not say it. That is what you see. I'm sorry, but that is what you see. It is there. And he also has enormous skill with that because he's got Mercury and Gemini, all of that. So I will just say this right now, that much of the you're not being an objective astrologer part, I'm just going to say, I guess in my defense, a lot of it wasn't the fact that I wasn't being an objective astrologer. In fact, it was the fact that I was reading what I see. For example, if I would have said this about Hitler, and I hate using the Hitler analogy now because it gets overstated, but if I were to say those things about Hitler, no one would say, oh, you're not being objective. Well, okay, but again, or if you say it about, when you start saying these things, especially when you're quoting evidence, like I would say this about something like, he said he's going to ban all Muslims, and I would get up and say, not only is this not constitutional, which it isn't, you can't ban a religion, okay, but it's not workable. It's not workable. Like, how are you going to do it? Ask them when they come into the country, what's your religion? That's going to work? They just lie. Anyway, so to talk about that as an example of just demagoguery, and something that a demagogue would say who doesn't have any solutions and just trying to incite passion, people would say, well, you're not being objective, you just don't like Trump. No, that's actually not the truth. They can both exist. I cannot like Trump and still read the chart correctly. Okay? And I also gave him a lot of credit oftentimes. Like, you know what? He's been very successful at this. It works for him. He's very good at doing that, and he is. But I understand. I understand why people would say that, because I definitely have gotten into a lot of personal commentary, a lot of personal insults against him. For that, I apologize on behalf of what I, maybe a standard I should uphold as an astrologer, to not do that. Yeah, I'm a person, and I have seen him, and I still see him as a real potential danger and threat and menace to the world. If he continues what we've seen, he definitely is and would be. But it's never good on any level to be so personally insulting towards someone, and that wasn't a good choice. I'm also going to talk about why I didn't overemphasize the idea that making predictions, people wonder why, like for instance, why I didn't predict, why I didn't make a big deal that Trump would win. And in fact, many times when I did see predictions that said Trump would win, I would actually post the counter. But wait a second, we can't really decide this yet. And why I actually was much less fervent about predicting that he could win, and maybe the reason is because when you know how much your words impact and you know how much it can panic people, you want to try to inspire, because in many ways he should have lost. It also showed that he could have been horrifically defeated, and he could have. The reason Trump won is not because he was so popular. It's because he had the grace, in many ways, of running against someone even more unpopular, and someone who was also attacked from every direction, like he was. And I wanted to do my best to make sure that people knew, to make sure that people did not lose heart, because everywhere people were seeing Hillary Clinton attacked like crazy, not only by the Republicans, but by Democrats and by the left. You know, Hillary, emails, she's corrupt, most corrupt person ever, and all of this stuff. And I knew what it was doing. It was just doing nothing but getting Trump closer to getting elected. And when people turn to you, like some people turn to me, to say, is he really going to get elected? Do you really think he's going to get elected? I mean, is there anything we can do? I'm not going to say, no, there's nothing we can do. He's definitely going to win. First of all, that's not true. Second of all, absolutely she could have won. And frankly, in many ways, she should have won. I don't like to say could and should, because it makes it seem like like karma made a mistake. It didn't make a mistake, okay? He was supposed to be president, and frankly, I saw it last summer, and I went, oh my God. I really hope this doesn't happen. This really looks like he's going to do it. I saw it as soon as I looked at it last summer, that if he gets through the next couple months, he could win. I don't think he will because I think his rhetoric is so divisive, but he definitely could win. What we knew about his chart, he definitely had the chart of someone who could win. But again, you have to measure that in real time and making a real election prediction against the chart of his challenger. And we didn't have a good chart to compare it to. That's why it was really not known. So I commend the astrologers that said Trump is going to win, but I also have to say, frankly, I didn't put a lot of credence into those predictions because we didn't have her actual birth chart. Now you might turn back to me and say, well, so what? We got it right and you didn't. I didn't even make a hard prediction about the election. And it's true. The only predictions I did make was saying that I didn't think Trump would win. So fine, you're right. I get it. I also said many times he definitely could win. So again, people hear what they want to hear when they want to, people that want to give me a hard time, you know, that's fine. Give me a hard time. It doesn't really matter. That part of it is just what it is. But I think I actually learned quite a bit. I really, you know, to not get as personally involved maybe on some level, but a lot of what I was doing relative to Donald Trump in this election at some point like this summer was much more about service to the community, to the world, to try to keep hope alive in people that were getting desperate and that were getting fearful because all they see, especially people who were anti-Trump, who thought, oh my God, we don't want this guy to be elected. Then they like log onto Facebook or YouTube or somewhere and all they see is anti-Hillary Clinton rhetoric everywhere. And they're saying, Christ, are these two people the same? And I took a lot of heat for saying they are not the same and trying to clearly distinguish between Trump and the danger he represents and Hillary Clinton and the danger she represents. They're not even in the same league. And they weren't, frankly, at least in my opinion. You might disagree with that, so I'm trying to be more open-minded. You may disagree with that. In my opinion, they're not even in the same league. Hillary Clinton is the problem of the status quo, which is going to incrementally change things. And by the way, she had a very progressive agenda. She incorporated a lot of what Bernie Sanders said. There was all kinds of good stuff, at least for liberals and progressives. Well, ain't going to happen because now we have someone who is completely, at least now and everything we've seen, anti-science, anti-women's choice, anti-immigration, and who knows what else, frankly, because we just don't know. He seems to not understand the way the world works and alliances, like why we have alliances like NATO. They don't just take our money. They provide stability in a large part of the world, and all of these alliances we have, yes, they meddle in different affairs, and it's complicated. It doesn't seem to understand the complications. Pay up or we're going to leave is not a solution to like the geopolitical relationships we have in the world. All of that represents and not even understanding currency and the debt, saying, well, we might just default on our debt and renegotiate it, print more money. This kind of thinking is insane, actually. It is insane. And again, understanding that maybe Donald Trump doesn't get this is much more dangerous than Hillary Clinton's status quo. You know, World War III, Hillary, all this stuff the last couple of weeks of the election. Again, maybe you don't agree with that, but the last couple months, I resisted predictions about this one or that one because we didn't have a good birth time, and I wanted to support what I think was the best option. And I let people know that Hillary could definitely win. Trump could definitely lose, and he could have. He could have been historically defeated. And frankly, that's what I thought a couple weeks ago. I actually really did. So again, and it's easy to think at if you don't have a good time to compare it to, because he could have been historically defeated, and this Jupiter Dasha could have totally shown his lack of stature. It could have shown that, and it still can show that. One of the things I thought was that he was going to lose. The losing scenario for me and Donald Trump was he's going to lose. It'll be historic defeat, and his Jupiter Dasha will be a shadow of what the Rahu Mars was. And it still could. Like I said, it still could. He could not get inaugurated. There could be legal challenge. There's a lot that can happen between now and January 20th. He could take office and some very unpleasant things could happen, which I'm not going to say, but you can draw your own conclusions.